Welcome back to another in the series of Kinescope Boy Scout shows featuring Bob Perin and presented by our local Boy Scout Council. The production of this series was handled by a group of ordinary citizens like you and me, non-professionals, civic-minded people who believe so in the importance of the movement that they wish to have it interpreted for the rest of the adults of this community. Now, how many times have you listened to Bob Perin sign off with his customary good scouting to you and happy trails? Well, what does good scouting mean? I wonder if you really know. Well, good scouting means good citizenship. It means physical fitness. It means character building. Now, how about those happy trails? Well, why does a boy join up? Because the fun of going on outside adventure, outdoor adventure, and this is good. Because he does retain the spiritual and practical values which really help to make him into a mature individual as he gets older. Now, you know, we're boys and the parents are very lucky to have a fellow like Bob Perin on their program. Bob is a professional scouter who loves boys, knows them, knows how to talk to them, and knows how to direct and guide their energies into the best positive channel. Now, today's program is concerned with emergencies and how to prepare for them. In hundreds of emergencies, great and small, on a local level, on a national level, Boy Scouts have chipped in and done a remarkable, wonderful job. And usually in an emergency, it's the best trained groups that do the finest kind of work. Now, in today's program, Bob is going to show you how these Boy Scout activities and ideas, if utilized in a home, can be put to the best possible use and start from the home.
Prepared. That's the Scout motto. And I have an idea that lots of folks think of it in terms of a fine thing for boys, but it doesn't need to apply to me. And I have an idea also that lots of folks think of it in terms of being prepared for a disaster. Well, in scouting, we look at this word, be prepared, a different way. And in order to talk about it, let me read to you a few sentences about what a famous man said about being prepared. George Bernard Shaw, he was a crusty old rascal, a lot of people think. But maybe you didn't like the way he did things or some of the things he said, but you'll have to agree if you ever sat through one of his plays that he could really write plays. He said, and I read, "In moments of crisis, my nerves act in a most extraordinary way. When utter disaster seems imminent, my whole being is instantaneously braced to avoid it. Size up the situation in a flash, set my teeth, contract my muscles, take a firm grip on myself, and without a tremor, always do the wrong thing." Being prepared in scouting is knowing how to do things, not that an emergency is around the corner every minute, but knowing how to do them to have fun. Learning a new skill, learning how to do something which prepares you to be in the out of doors for a great adventure or for something right around your home. Let's take a look at some of these things that I have over here that have to do with being prepared. There's nothing unusual about them. They are things which scouts know a great deal about and which we use in scouting all of the time. Start with this simple piece of waterproof cloth called a ground cloth. A second-class scout who's been out on a trip or a hike or an adventure is well acquainted with it. And it's a simple thing for a boy to make. It doesn't have to be bought. It's a piece of heavy cloth, cotton or muslin, and it's about 8 by 10 or 10 feet square is a good size for it. And it's waterproof with waterproofing material, which we bought in any store that sells that type of stuff, a hardware store or a commercial store of any kind. And we put it on with a brush ourselves, and so we have a ground cloth. Now, you grown-ups may think in terms of a scout making a pup tent out of it or throwing it down on the ground to put his sleeping bag on it, but there are some things you do with it in an emergency or in a be prepared situation that are very helpful. Did you ever stop to think that you can make quite a wash basin out of this? How do you make a wash basin out of that? You say, well, it's simple. You just dig a hole in the ground the size of a wash basin or a bucket and poke the tarp down in it, leaving the edges out around the top, and fill it up with water. And you can wash your face and hands, wash the dishes, do anything you want. And then when you're done, you just pick up the four corners, carry it off away from where your campsite is or where you're working in the case of a disaster, and throw it out, hang up the tarp to dry, and you're done with the whole business. It's a good storage place for water. In a real emergency, when the city water's out and there's no water in the taps and everything's all fouled up, it's a simple thing to dig a bigger hole and put the tarp in it and lay the edges out around so that no dirt can get in over the top of it, and you can catch rainwater, or you can store water supply from some source that is available to you. And by taking the corner of the tarp and throwing it over the hole after you've dug it and got the tarp down in it, you throw the corner over it, it will protect it from dirt and from all kind of debris that might get in it. And so you have with this tarp the basic start, or the beginning, of a Be Prepared home setup. Now, Be Prepared for a home setup is not Be Prepared only for a disaster. It's Be Prepared for fun. Picnics, hikes, hunting trips, fishing trips, whatever the family may do together, these things will all help. Let's go from the tarp to some other things that we have. We were talking about water. One of the big problems in a disaster, or in a major catastrophe in your community, or just on a hunting trip in some strange place, one of the big problems is water purification, because most of the water which we come in contact with may be contaminated. Now, we've got to have something to do it in, so I'm going to use one of the pots that I have in my Be Prepared kit. The simplest basic method that's always safe, and most anyone can do, is boil the water. Well, one thing about it you must remember is that it has to be boiled for a full 2 or 3 minutes, and it must be a rolling boil so that the bubbles are coming up. That presents some difficulties at times because it takes quite a lot of heat to get it to a boil, and after it's boiled it must be cooled. And somebody right away says, well, it tastes a little flat after it's been boiled, but believe me, when you're without any water at all, you'll be glad to drink whatever you have as long as it's pure. So we can boil it. That's one way of doing it. And then any second-class scout has learned some other ways of doing it by using some commercial preparations which are available to everybody for water purification. There's aqua tabs, which the scout's acquainted with, and halazone tablets, and it's a simple matter in a real emergency to take common ordinary iodine, 2% iodine, and put 3 drops of iodine to a quart of water. 3 drops of iodine to a quart of water, and that will purify the water in such a way that it is safe to drink. Now, you mustn't confuse the muddiness or discoloration of the water with its purity, because a nice, clear, cool mountain stream running down through the hills may look pretty and cool and safe, but up a ways from where you're drinking, there may be a cow drinking also, and so you never know what you're getting into. The fact that there's mud in the water does not make it impure. Well, water purification is important in a Be Prepared plan for our home. And you say, well, how do I find out all of that? I don't know anything about it. There's a simple way to find out, and that is with the Scout Handbook. Oh, this is not a commercial. We don't need a commercial with this, because, you know, next to the Holy Bible, this particular book has the largest volume sale in the country of any book. It has in it wonderful adventure, and, incidentally, all of the things you need to know to work with the equipment which we're showing on our Be Prepared plan. It's interesting to note that in Alaska, where you're required to carry something in your aircraft for survival, a very specified kit. And you can't take off without it, because if you get down there with engine trouble or for any other reason, bad weather, you have a long ways to walk. One of the required items is the boys' handbook, the Scout Handbook for Boys. And so it's a book in which you will find the answer to many things, and I'm going to put it in my family Be Prepared setup. Not only for disaster, but for the simple thing of cooking a proper meal in the woods, finding out about cleaning up my dishes, learning how to sharpen an axe properly so that I can hunt and have fun, all of the things that I need to know. The field book also is a companion book to that. The thing about the field book is that it has pictures in it illustrating all of these things that you may want to know about, and some interesting things too. And it's an integral part of our Be Prepared setup. Well, when we think of Be Prepared, we generally think of first aid. It's a common denominator. And in our Be Prepared setup, we're going to have some first aid equipment. This kit here is a homemade kit. This one is the individual boys kit, and this one is a troop kit for a patrol. We could spend the rest of our time arguing and talking and discussing these kits, but I'm just going to say this about them. You will have to build your own first aid kit to suit your own needs. You should have certain items in it that are important and which you probably know. Whatever kit you build, in scouting, we teach boys not only how to take care of other people, but how to take care of themselves. And not only how to take care of themselves, but how to take care to see that they don't need first aid. In other words, this first aid kit is up to you. You put in it what you want and put it in the kind of a thing that you yourself want to put it in. But it's a very important part of our Be Prepared setup. Well, quickly, the Scout axe. It's not a hatchet cut down from a big axe for a boy to play with. It's a very wonderful piece of gear in any Be Prepared situation. It will do many things for you in an actual disaster, rescue work. It'll do a lot of things for you on a hunting trip. Your cooking and eating is lots easier when you have this little axe with you. It doesn't weigh a great deal or take up a lot of room. And we're going to add to this axe a file to keep it sharp with. There's nothing harder to work with or quite as useless as a dull axe. And a second class or first class scout knows all about how to do this. So that we're going to add an axe and a file to our Be Prepared kit. The shovel. Well, it's just a little shovel. I like it because I can carry it in my pack in the woods. It has a lot of uses, both around camp, on family picnics, on hikes, and in a disaster, it's very handy for burying garbage, leftover foods, and other waste materials. It's part of the sanitation equipment of my Be Prepared kit. Well, I have a pot and a skillet. Now, this old iron skillet. Lots of people say they don't like fried food, but you know, in a Be Prepared situation, this old skillet's a pretty handy outfit to have around. It'll do a lot of things. First, it heats very quickly. It's very easy to heat it. And when you're sitting on a pile of stuff that used to be your front porch, and that's the only fire you've got is what you make from that, it's very important that you don't use too much of it and that you do it quickly, because you'll have lots of other things to bother with. Another thing I like about this is it can be made into an oven. It's a very simple thing to put a lid over it. Even a board from your house will make it into an oven, and you can bake pretty wonderful biscuits. It's easy to clean. It can be scraped without injuring it, and you can actually scrape the food out of it quickly and easily, and it takes little water. Water is a very major problem in all disasters. Well, what kind of disasters are you talking about all the time? Well, simple disasters: fire, flood, tornado, earthquake. Most anything can happen. And you need to have some kind of preparation, even in your own family, for such a simple thing as a fire. Well, let's look at the food situation. In our Be Prepared kit, we've got to have some food. Start with such a simple thing as candy. It's a good thing to have in your Be Prepared kit, but we don't want chocolate bars. We want some kind of hard candy that won't melt. Caramels of any kind, chewy candy, peanut brittle, hard candy, fruit drops of any kind. That type of candy is a very fine thing because it will keep. We're going to use paper cups and paper plates in our Be Prepared kit. They won't, they don't have to be washed. We don't need water to wash them. We can burn them. And they're light and easy and they don't take up much room. We have aluminum foil. It's a very important thing. There's so many things we can do with it. Waterproofing matches. We talk a great deal about having waterproof matches, and we think in terms of dipping them in paraffin and putting nail polish on them and many other things that we hear about. But we're just going to take the common book matches that everyone has and take a piece of this aluminum foil and tear off a square of it. We'll lay the matches in the center of it and fold the foil up over the top, and then we make a moisture-proof seal by rolling it down on itself until it's down tight against the matches. Then the ends, we turn the corners in. Now we broke that open. And turn this corner in. And we have a moisture-proof package for our matches, and we put them in our Be Prepared kit. Flashlight, well, it's got in a food box just because I happen to set it there. We want a flashlight, but we must be sure and take the batteries out of it. Salt. I have candles, extra, and I use a candle lantern. It's well known to Scouts and is available through Scouting Supply Service. I use it because it's windproof and the candle won't go out, and I don't need batteries for the candle. And the other foods we have are up to your own choice. There is another thing in our kit which we want to be sure and remember, and that's soap. Being clean is important, particularly in a disaster. And we want to put soap in our kit, and just to keep it, we're going to wrap it in foil so that we have it. We can even mark it if you'd like to do that. One last thing I'd like to say about the food is dehydrated foods. You wonder why we don't have lots of dehydrated food in our kit. It keeps well, and it's light to carry on a pack. But in a disaster of any kind, water, again, as I say, is a major problem. And so when you mix dehydrated foods, you need lots of water. And we're going to keep our dehydrated foods in a proper proportion. In other words, soup and a few common things, so that we don't have to make a major problem out of our water situation. Don't forget the sugar. Lump sugar is easier to handle, it's easier to control, and you can have less waste connected with it if you'll put lump sugar in your kit instead of the loose sugar. Well, what else have we got? A Scout knife. Well, why a Scout knife? Well, partly because your boy knows all about it. And you know, if you'll let your boy have a hand in this thing, he'll take charge of the whole business for you. and get most of the stuff together, he knows how to use it and what it's for and how to do it. So we use the Scout knife because it has a blade and a can opener and a awl to dig with, and is a very, very handy thing in a case of an emergency. Well, rope, yes, Scouts know lots about knots. There's many places that we can use rope that are important and that we ought to keep in mind. One thing more, we keep a blanket for first aid work mostly. We can't cover up the 4 children with it. We couldn't take enough bedding to take care of all 4 of them. But we use a blanket for the person that's injured or to keep mother and the baby comfortable as we can. A bundle of newspapers, they're great to use in place of blankets in an emergency. You can put them under you and over you. It's also good for an arm splint. And we don't need to keep a fancy splint of any kind if we have newspapers handy. Well, let me show you one more thing about this Be Prepared business that's an important part of the kit. You see, an important part of the kit here that we can't even show you is what you have in your mind about it. A plan of action with your family. And mothers, you're going to like this, because I wonder what mother that has a boy hasn't had on her hands a real problem of asking him to put his clothes up at night instead of dropping them on the floor when he steps out of them to go to bed. Well, in our Be Prepared plan at home, we have a definite plan of action. And the boys, Steve and Dan, put their clothes on the chair at the head of their bed. Oh, not to be neat, you understand, not at all, but to be ready in case of an emergency. Now, our shoes are the most important item of our clothing. During the Second World War, in England, they found out that if a man got out in the street in a disaster barefooted, and there's glass and wood and bricks and pieces of pavement scattered all around, he couldn't even move because his feet were so tender and he was used to walking with shoes. So the first thing you want to get in a disaster is your shoes. It's important that you have them on. Now, instead of just feeling around on the floor in the dark for them and wondering where they are, we're going to put them right against the front leg of our chair next to our bed. Now, if such a disaster, a tornado, for example, should even blow the house down on top of us and we're thrown out of bed, it's much easier in the dark to feel around and find the chair and then go right down the front leg of the chair and find our shoes. Our clothing we're going to lay over the back of the chair. It's important that we have everything we need so that in cold weather, a jacket, our underclothes, our pants, and our shirt. And you know, a strange thing that you may not have thought about is that you are so used to getting dressed that you can dress very quickly in the dark without any trouble. But you can't dress if you can't find the things to put on. And so in our house, and in your house, to be prepared, it's a nice habit, and your boy will like the idea. We put our clothes at a chair always at the head of our bed in a certain order so that we know exactly where they are and how to get to them. Well, be prepared in scouting. Let me give you a Scoutmaster's minute about it. You know, it's that time in the meeting when the Scoutmaster takes a minute. The fun's over, the games have been played, the boys have learned about compass and all the other wonderful things. And then the man takes a minute to say something worthwhile to a boy. And you'd be surprised how much he listens, because he's very interested many times. Let's go outside right here in the studio for our Scoutmaster's minute. A long time ago, back in the early days when there were steam engines with whistles on them, there was an engineer. Oh, it wasn't Casey Jones. It was just an engineer. It's a true story. And he ran the Midnight Express. And one night as they thundered down the main line, he came around the bend, and there in the beam of the engine headlight was a wreck. 2 boxcars from a freight train that had been derailed on the siding next to the main line had fallen across the main tracks. And there he was, right at the boxcars. He had to do something. Well, this engineer advanced the throttle, gave the engine all of the power that it had, and with the whole weight of the train and the impetus of the speed, plowed through those boxcars. In about a half a mile that it took him to stop the train, everyone in the train wondered exactly what had happened and why he had picked up speed instead of trying to stop. And so the conductor came walking up the train and said to him, "Say, how did you know in that fraction of a second what to do in an emergency that would have taken some people a long time to figure out? Because you did just the right thing. If you had tried to slow down, the train would have plowed into those cars at a very slow speed, but too fast to really be safe, and it might have derailed the engine and the whole train. But because of the fact that you speeded up, we plowed through them and no one was hurt." "Well," said the engineer, "let me tell you something about being prepared. I've run this run for about 10 years. And many nights as I ran it, I went through my mind all of the things that might happen. And then I planned an action to take care of those things if they happened. So you see, when I saw those boxcars directly in front of my engine, I did not think. All I had to do was act on some ideas which I already had tucked away in my mind. Be prepared? Yes. Good scouting to you all. And happy trails. And come back and visit us again sometime."
You know, I'd like to propose a vote of thanks to Bob for organizing all these common-sense suggestions. In time of emergency, it's important that every individual and every family be prepared to care for himself and other members of his family. Now, preparation should start with the individual. But again, if the family is prepared also, it means that it in turn can contribute to the community effort. The family is prepared to meet an emergency is the family that's going to survive. There's no question about it. Frankly, one of the points I appreciated most in this show we saw today was Bob's comment that it teaches a boy neatness. Well, Scouts know that almost every outdoorsman carries a ditty bag. In our next show, Bob is going to tell us what a ditty bag contains and its meaning to a boy.